So, picture this. It's Paris, March 2023. You've saved up, you've booked the trip of a lifetime. But when you get there, instead of the smell of fresh croissants, you're just hit with this wall of stench. The City of Lights is literally buried under mountains of rotting garbage. Now, this wasn't just some random fluke. It was a symptom of something much, much deeper. A sign that the economic engine of France might be fundamentally broken. So, let's get into
That quote from a tourist says it all, doesn't it? The romantic dream of Paris just completely colliding with this foul, smelly reality. But what on earth could cause such a massive breakdown in one of the world's most advanced, most beautiful cities?
And that, right there, is the big question we're going to tackle. Because the garbage crisis was never really about the garbage. It was a perfect, and kind of smelly, metaphor for an economy that a lot of people think is just fundamentally unreformable.
To really understand this, you first have to get your head around a pretty wild idea. Those piles of trash weren't a sign the system had failed. No, they were a sign the system was working exactly as it was designed to, as a strategic act of economic warfare.
By the middle of March, we're talking about over 10,000 tons of waste just rotting on the sidewalks of Paris. Now, to put that in perspective, that's about the same weight as the Eiffel Tower, just spread out in festering heaps all over the city. The scale of it was just staggering.
So, what caused this city-paralyzing strike? What was the big deal? Well, the government wanted to raise the retirement age by just 2 years, from 62 to 64. Meanwhile, you look at places like the US and Germany, and the standard is 67. So how could this seemingly tiny change cause France to basically set itself on fire?
To answer that, we have to peel back the first layer of this onion. And we need to go way back to the ashes of World War II, to a deal that really forged the soul of modern France and created a set of rights that many people there consider absolutely untouchable.
Okay, so it's 1944. Paris is liberated, but General de Gaulle has a huge problem, a powerful, and more importantly, armed communist resistance. To stop a civil war from breaking out, he makes a deal. This deal, known as the Happy Days program, basically gave the communists and their unions control over creating France's brand new social security system. And this is the crucial part. Because of that history, this social model isn't just seen as a policy, it's seen as a sacred right, born directly out of the victory over Nazism. And the core of that deal was this concept right here, gestion paritaire. It basically meant that the huge pots of money for pensions and healthcare would be managed by unions and employers together, not by the government. Think about that. It gave the unions a permanent, independent source of power and money, no matter who was in charge of the country.
So you fast forward to today, and that historical deal has created a modern-day structural trap. It's a paradox of immense union power that now just leads to total and complete gridlock in the French economy.
And here's where it gets really weird. You'd think the unions must be massive, right? Nope. Union membership in France is shockingly low. We're talking only about 8% of the total workforce and a tiny 5% in the private sector. So how can such a small group hold an entire country hostage?
It's because they are absolute masters of asymmetric warfare. The hardline CGT union, for example, doesn't focus on getting tons of members. Instead, it focuses its power on controlling the absolute jugular veins of the economy. See, you don't need a lot of members when those few members can shut down every single oil refinery, port, and power plant in the country. Now, all this union power is used to protect one thing above all else, the CDI, the Permanent Employment Contract. Getting the CDI isn't just like getting a job, it's more like a marriage for life. It creates this super rigid system of insiders who have a job forever and outsiders who can barely even get a foot in the door.
For a business owner, trying to fire an employee with a CDI, even one who's not performing, is a total nightmare. You're facing this long, expensive war of registered letters, formal interviews with union reps, and then an almost certain lawsuit in a labor court that pretty much always sides with the employee. It's a legal labyrinth.
This whole system creates a really bizarre side effect. French companies are terrified of hiring their 50th employee. Why? Because the second you hit 50, a whole new universe of regulations, union requirements, and red tape just crashes down on you. So what happens? Thousands of companies just stop growing at 49.
And all of these things, the historical mindset, the union power, the rigid labor market, they all collide and explode on one ultimate battleground, the fight over retirement. This is the third rail of French politics. You touch it, you die.
Okay, let's look at the hard numbers, because they don't lie. The French pension system is what's called pay-as-you-go. Today's workers pay for today's retirees. Back in 1960, you had 4 workers supporting every 1 retiree. Today, it's just 1.7, and it's falling fast. The math here is just brutal, and it's undeniable. The system is going bankrupt.
So President Macron knew there was no way he could get the votes in Parliament to pass his reform. So what did his government do? They used a constitutional nuclear option, Article 49.3, which lets them force a law through without a vote. To about 70% of the French public, this wasn't just a policy debate anymore. It felt like a democratic coup, and that is what sent people pouring into the streets.
So what happens when a system refuses to change even when the math is screaming that it has to? Well, you eventually hit the final checkmate, a mountain of debt that you just can't wish away.
Take a look at that number. That's the French national debt, 3 trillion euros. It's now over 112% of the country's entire economic output for a year. Now, for a long time, super low interest rates made this manageable, but let me tell you, that party is over.
And this isn't some new problem, not at all. You have to go all the way back to 1974. That was the last time the French government actually passed a balanced budget. For nearly half a century, the country has been living on a credit card.
And who pays for all this? You guessed it, the French worker. France has one of the highest tax burdens in the entire developed world. Here's a way to think about it. The average person in France works all the way until late July just to pay the government. The rest of the year is for them.
Which in the end leaves us with this huge question. Is what we're seeing in France a glorious resistance against the harsh realities of global capitalism, a noble fight to keep a more humane way of life? Or is it a kind of self-destructive suicide pact, a refusal to accept mathematical reality that is just slowly sinking one of the world's great nations? It really seems like the choice is between the romance of the fight and the cold, hard logic of the numbers.